Hi Shamsa, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have this talk with you today.
Same. I was just saying, long time coming. Super excited.
Yeah, we've been trying to organize it for quite a while. So I'll kind of jump into it. I just want you to kind of briefly introduce yourself for everyone.
Sure. So my name is, as you kindly introduced me as, Shamsa. I'm from Muscat, Oman, and it feels so good to say this. I'm a recent graduate with a Bachelor's of Science and Management and Organizational Behavior. And at the moment, I'm job searching, doing tests and interviews, hoping to land something soon. And I'll also soon be a published author, inshallah, God willing, by the end of the year. I was a lead author in a chapter I wrote about MOOCs, massive open online courses, and entrepreneurship education and higher education institutions. And that's basically current for me.
Okay, wow, that's very impressive. Well, congratulations on graduating. And you
Thank
know,
you. Thank
job
you.
searching is always like a big thing. You always have to apply to like 100 places,
Of
and then
course.
one answers. No, but
Yeah.
it goes well. We've all been
No,
there.
hopefully. Yeah.
Wow, okay. So tell me a bit more about your dyslexia then. So when did you kind of find out that you had dyslexia? Or how?
Yeah. So my mom sort of clocked that something was different about me compared to my brothers quite early on when it came to reading. I wasn't really catching on or up. So I think she first identified that something was different, but I still managed to sort of get through without major issues until I was in like grade 6. So I was 11. That's when my difficulties were properly realized, and I'd failed English and was performing poorly in pretty much most of my classes, but it was pretty much because I couldn't read. I couldn't read the things that I was given to do on my own. So that was kind of where we were like, okay, something's up, and I got assessed. So my mom had heard of dyslexia, but didn't really know too much about what it was. So she did her super mom thing and started doing her research. She came across the book, The Gift of Dyslexia by Ronald Davis, and started figuring out how she can, best support me and get me supported. And as for dyscalculia, that was later on. I was around 17 years old. And I sort of knew I wasn't great with numbers, but I wasn't assessed again up until I went to university.
Okay. Do you feel like knowing at an early age kind of helped you out more in school?
Um, yes and no. I mean, yes, because I did get support. I went through the Davis program, um, and I got accommodation. I got extra time in my exams, but it was still a struggle. I knew I was dyslexic, but I don't know if it did anything for like helping me other than the accommodation. It was still a stressful experience.
Of course, it
Yeah.
always is. I mean, I just wanted to ask because we're both kind of in the Middle East. So in Egypt, it's
Right.
not really that known like it is now, but
Mhm.
when I was younger, it was really hard. So I was just kind of
Right.
curious to know like how you dealt with it. Did you kind of feel relieved? Did you get the right
Right.
support and the needed accommodations? So I'm
Right.
just wondering like
So
what did
yeah,
you
I
do?
mean, yeah, growing up with dyslexia, it was character building to say the least. My K to 12, my K to 12 schooling was a struggle. I'd moved around to different schools a lot, and I was trying to find somewhere that I'd fit in, but it never really worked out. And over here we study in Arabic and English. English is actually my first language because we speak English at home. So that like was another thing that everyone was speaking Arabic, and I kind of felt ostracized because my Arabic was broken. It wasn't great. Um, and yeah, so and there's also math, which I was struggling with. But like thinking back on it, although it was overall a stressful experience, I don't know if I would have it any different because it kind of molded me into the person that I am. It wasn't ideal, but I kind of accept that it was what it was, and I'm kind of always trying to find the silver lining. At the time, it was stressful, yes, but now I can kind of reflect back on it and think, oh, okay, so I gained all these other like skills like resilience, and I'm like a hard worker, and I always have to work a lot harder than pretty much all my other peers that didn't have any learning difficulties. So it wasn't ideal, but I did my best and turned out perfectly fine.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah, and in terms of accommodations, yeah, I got the extra time. What honestly was a pivotal point for me was going through the Davis program when I was around 11. That's what really kind of helped with my reading and writing. So I remember I was saying I failed English, which sort of was the ultimate red flag and led me to being assessed.
Yeah.
I did a reset test and managed to get through to the next year. And I remember that at the time they were kind of dividing classes based on ability. So naturally I was placed in the bottom set. Having gone through only two weeks of the Davis program and continuing to do some of the exercises at home with my mom, it kind of gave me that push that I needed to just not only go up a set, but I ended up in the top set, aka the high ability class the next year. So it definitely wasn't just the Davis program. There was gaining more confidence in my abilities and learning the extra time in exams. And I think it was also because I had a general love for reading and writing, which I think pushed me the farthest. I want to hone in on that because my love for reading and writing was there before I could even read and write. So my mom would have me choose a book to read before bed throughout my childhood, my early childhood. She continued to kind of read for me even when I was older, up until I was like around 11, because I loved books but couldn't read them. I loved storytelling and, would write them down to document them, but I'd be lucky if I could understand it the next time I tried to read it or had someone read it to me. But the desire and passion was there. I just didn't have the right enabling tools. Mm-hmm. So ironically, English after the intervention was one of my favorite classes and the one that I excelled in the most. So in terms of just my education from K to 12, I've never really academically excelled. It wasn't up until university was like a whole different experience.
I'm really happy you mentioned the love for reading and writing, because you're the first person I talked to who's into that kind of area, because most people are like artistic or they're more like computer based. But in terms of like actual physical reading and writing, I haven't really met anyone that's really into that yet. So it really goes to show that dyslexia does not stop you from doing what you love. You can do anything. You can honestly achieve anything you really truly have passion for. So it's impressive that you didn't let dyslexia stop you from that. Like even though it was hard, you still kept going because it's your passion.
Yeah, precisely. Everyone has potential. It's just getting the right tools to help you do what you need to do. And reading and writing, once you have the help and support, it gets easier. And it's the content that's interesting. It's just the difficulty with reading and writing, that's the part that kind of hinders you. But yeah.
Nice. So we briefly talked about your mom and how she supported you, and she would read to you. So do you feel like your mom is your biggest support system when it came to your education?
Definitely. She was really, she was amazing. She didn't really know too much. She came from an education background. She studied higher education for her master's. So she was in the ed background, but she knew of dyslexia, but not too much about it and what it meant to be dyslexic. So, as soon as I was identified with dyslexia, she, did her research. She tried to figure out how I could get supported and how she can support me. She would, help tutor me, got me tutors if it's something that, she might not have been able to tutor me with. No, she was definitely one of my biggest advocates. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel it's really important to have like a support system around you, because dyslexia, it affects you mentally, physically, emotionally, and it's hard to kind of deal with it all by yourself. So it's really good to kind of have, whether it's a teacher or a friend or like a parent, it's important to have someone there who's kind of like backing you up and just motivating you to like keep going. It's really, I feel like it just boosts you. It kind of also makes you a bit more confident with yourself, like it's normal to have dyslexia. So that's good.
And that's key. That's key. I think confidence is key in learning. That's how I felt with, the reading and writing. The Davis program definitely helped, but it was also just gaining that confidence in myself that, it's okay to make mistakes when you read, as long as you kind of get the idea and, you'll figure it out. The more you make mistakes, the more you learn, the more you'll get better, so that confidence really does help and goes a long way. Yeah.
So perfect. So tell me a bit more about your uni life then. So how was that like?
Yeah, so university was like a whole entirely different experience. So, I was, as I was saying, like year to year trying to get by, pushing through, kind of scraping by with K to 12. But then when it came to university, so I went to university initially in the UK. So there I had support. I had not just the extra time I could type instead of handwrite. I was in a program which was pretty much all coursework based, so I didn't have exams. So it was all really conducive to my learning. And I gained a lot of studying, learning skills, how did I get through a lot of content quickly, and, research skills, writing skills. So yeah, it was just a conducive to my learning environment. So that's when I started excelling really academically. And then when I came back to finish off my university here, it was an entirely different environment. It was an entirely different experience. I was faced with a lot of doubt, from my professors about, I feel like they felt as though I was trying to get a free pass, with my accommodations. They didn't really believe in dyslexia. They thought that I was just trying to get a free pass to get help. So, it was a struggle. It was a headache to get the accommodation. Sometimes I would be at the exam and they'd forget that I was supposed to have extra time. And it was like a back and forth. There was a professor that actually refused to give me extra time on the day of the assessment. So then there was a back and forth there. And it was just it was stressful, but I was older and I already had a lot of the tools that I needed to succeed. And I became my advocate, which is important that you have that in yourself. So, I fought for myself, and, it still was a good experience. And also another thing was, I got a bachelor's of science. So I was doing all these math related classes that I hadn't done math for 6 to 7 years prior to finishing off my university here. So it's I'm dyscalculic. I had to do probability and stats, calculus, finance, accounting, all of these different number-based classes. And I was extremely nervous about that. It started off a bit rocky, but then, I got better and better. And again, with the whole confidence thing, it's I kept telling myself that I couldn't do it with math. But then I was like, hey, I couldn't do it with the writing and reading, but then here I am now, loving writing and reading. So I managed to kind of do it nonetheless. So yeah, no, university was a much better experience.
That's good. Wow. It was a journey. Sounds like a journey. But yeah, I can totally relate in terms of not having accommodation, because I feel like in Middle East they don't really fully accept dyslexia or learning difficulties in general. It takes a while for people to kind of open up to it. So
Right.
I'm really sorry you went through that in uni there. It's not the best thing to feel like people just, they're not being as helpful as they should be, especially when you have proof that you are dyslexic.
Yep.
If you have something to prove that you need the extra time, then you should get it. But we're working on that, so let's hope that does change by time. But
Definitely.
you did it. You graduated, you finished it, and you're now working, getting a job. So
Yeah.
it's been a journey, but you made it at the end, and that's what matters, so that's good.
Yeah. And definitely also I wanted to touch on in school, it wasn't just in, I kind of made it seem as though school wasn't all too bad, but in school, other than just me saying it was a struggle, I had teachers that were really, I had amazing teachers, but I also had pretty cruel teachers when it came to reading and writing. And I feel like that also, thank God, I still was able to kind of gain that confidence in my learning and in, reading and writing later on. But it was pretty traumatic, with, for instance, when I was in one of my Arabic classes, I couldn't read Arabic. So, I'd be stuttering and, stumbling over my words and I wouldn't get it right. And my teacher, one of my teachers, I was about, I think, 6, 7 at the time. Every time I would make a mistake, she'd take a book, a hardcover book, and hit me over the head with a book every time I would make a mistake. So I was terrified every time she would ask me to read aloud in class, because I was like, she's going to hit me on the head with this book. And it got to the point where I came home to my mom one day and I bursted into tears. And I'm like, my teacher, every time I make a mistake, would hit me over the head with a book. And of course, the school didn't condone that. So she made a complaint. And, I had a lot of situations like that where, I was kind of beat down rather than so what can I do to help? It was you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not this, you're not that. So that took a long time for me to kind of break within myself, although I feel like I handled it relatively well. for instance, in university in the UK, when I started doing well academically, the first year I got my grades back, I was in such utter disbelief that I did well. I was in such utter disbelief that when they gave me my grades back, I called the university to double check they hadn't made a mistake. I was like, this can't be me. I couldn't have gotten this grade, So even though, yeah, like I was sort of confident in my learning, I wasn't confident in myself at all in learning. So it was just, yeah, it took a while to kind of break that within myself. Yeah.
I've been to 5 different schools, so I've jumped around a lot. And I also had one specific school where my experience there was really awful. It was when I was in Egypt, sadly, and teachers just weren't accepting of it. I was really young, and of course, not all of them, but there were just a few where they were like, this isn't a thing, you're just making it up, it's an excuse. Yeah, you can do better. So it's just, they're not open to understanding. They don't want to learn about it. They don't want to go through the extra hassle of having to use more accessible materials or like worksheets for someone who has a learning difficulty. And I feel it just can't be this way, because teachers, honestly, they take up the majority of your time, like when you're younger, because you go to school for 8 hours a day, so you spend most of the time with your teachers, so they should be your role models. So it's definitely something we really do need to work on. We need them to be more open to it and more understanding, and kind of use more accommodations in their classrooms for kids who have learning difficulties. And you touched up on something else, that in Arabic class you have this issue. So I've had this question actually quite a lot, like, does dyslexia affect you in other languages? And it definitely does. It's not just English, it's any language. Like whatever language you speak, it can affect you in that language. Some might be more than others, but it's still dyslexia at the end of the day. It is a learning difficulty, so it does affect your learning and your languages.
Although, like, for a while I was exempt from Arabic, and that was a push and a fight, because studying in 2 languages was incredibly difficult for me. But then I kind of, looking back on it, I don't know if I regret it or not, because now I'm struggling because, I'm going into the workforce, and it helps to be bilingual because the country is bilingual. English is spoken in most organizations, but if you have to deal with the government, then Arabic would be preferred. So, I do, maybe I can pick it up now, I suppose, now that I don't have everything else, because, with school, you're young, you have all the other things that you're dealing with. So it's something that I don't know if I regret being exempted from it or not. Maybe if I could just sit in the classes, it would have been good, just to keep hearing the language, speaking the language, because then otherwise it's, it's harder to pick up.
I mean, it's never too late to go back. You can always just take a course or two, learn online. There's so many things online now. So if that's definitely something you want to do, then go for it.
Yeah.
It is helpful. Wow, amazing. So it's been a journey, your education. So tell me, what has it been like now that you've graduated? Like, what are you currently doing?
Yeah, so now that I've graduated, so right before I graduated in my last term of university, I did an internship at a company called OQ, which is an oil and gas company, and I was in the HR department. So it was a really good experience. And honestly speaking, I feel as though I spent all these years in school, and then I went into the workforce, and I'm like, this is so different. This is so different. It's like, they say that it's to prepare you, but like, I mean, of course you have a lot of skills that you gain that you can apply in your job, but it was like a whole different playing field, and you have to deal with a whole set of other things, dealing with people and office politics, and but it was a really good teaser of what to expect when I do get my job. So now I'm just kind of like doing online courses. I'm doing this Google project management course on Coursera. And then I'm gonna hopefully write another paper maybe sometime soon if I get it. And other than that, nothing really, just job searching, doing interviews. And can I just say, these psychometric tests, you think you're done with the exams and the testing, and then you go into it, and then you have these psychometric tests, which they're using to kind of, I understand we have so many people that are job searching. So they kind of want to weed people out. So they have these tests and, for instance, the last one I did, the numerical section, they're like, you can't use a calculator. And I was like, oh my God, here we go. Yes, I'd done calculus and probability and statistics, but I could use a calculator the whole time. So my mental arithmetic, I'm not great at it. So I didn't do really well in the test. And I'm like, such a shame, and it is such a shame because they're kind of missing out on a pool of potential that is going to go untapped with people that might not be great at test taking. And it's not like, oh, you do the test and you do the interview. If you don't get through the test and get a certain grade, you don't do the interview. So it's like they're really missing out on this whole pool of potential that,
it's a very
process way to go about it, but yeah.
It would be just easier if they just kind of get you into an interview and really just ask you everything they need to ask you. But I don't really know.
So many applicants, that's the thing. So I kind of get it, although I'm like, I don't like this, but I get why they're doing it because there's just so many applicants and they can't handle that volume.
You'll get through it, don't worry. It's just
Inshallah.
a bit of an satisfying or unnice phase, but you'll definitely get through it. You'll find a job that you have complete passion for, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So I just want to touch up a bit on your dyslexia page. So it is Dyslexia_Oman. So tell me, when did you start it and what is your goal with the page?
Right. So, well, really, I started it a few years back. I started it, I'd say maybe 4 or so years back, quite a while back. And then I stopped for a while and then I came back to it. Well, really, it was to help people find their enabling tools. I basically act as a middleman. So if someone contacts me, I direct them to the appropriate professionals or provide them with the tools and resources that I know of and have used myself. So it was just really a way for me to contribute and help in ways that I can to make it easier for people to find information and get appropriate help. So that's kind of what the page was set up for. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
No,
and another thing is I noticed, because initially I was just posting about dyslexia and trying to raise awareness about what dyslexia is, but I realized that there's so much power in sharing stories. And that's where I started that segment of sharing people's stories, because a lot of people can, relate to that. It's one thing to kind of read research-based information, and then it's another thing to have someone tell you, this is my story and I'm going through it and I know what you're going through. So that's why I kind of went down that avenue of sharing stories. Yeah.
That was actually going to be my next question, because I started off exactly like you. I just kind of posted content about dyslexia just to kind of get it out there, raise more awareness about it. But then I noticed that you really need to put more stories out there so people can relate to you more. Because if you just share information, people are going to be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But then if you talk with other people and share experiences and their journeys with dyslexia, it really gives them something to relate to. They're like, oh yeah, I went through the same thing, or yeah, I had the same experience in university or in school. So it's really important to have these talks, and that's what also inspired me to start doing these talks, to kind of make it more out there that we're all going through similar phase with dyslexia, and it's very normal. And it's just a journey that we go through to kind of reach our goals at the end, what we want to do in the future. So I'm glad you started that segment, because it is really helpful. And I hope it just keeps going, because it's so important to share other people's stories. It really does make a difference.
But one thing that I did realize, because initially I wanted to share more stories of Armanis, because, it's one thing to share. It's great sharing stories from all over, right? Because that makes us feel like, okay, we're really not alone, because everyone everywhere is kind of facing this. But I wanted specifically to have more Armanis share their stories, because that's even more relatable. It's here, close to home. It's home. But a lot of Armanis were very scared to share their story. And even if they knew that having dyslexia didn't mean that, it's the end of the world, or it's like you have some sort of weird disease or something, they knew that, but because society didn't understand it, they were scared to share their story, and they didn't know how people would take it. So I understand that, but that's why I started with some Armanis, and then I kind of hit a roadblock, and I tried with, people from abroad. And I feel like by seeing more people share their story, it's making them more comfortable with sharing their story. But it's unfortunate that that's the case, that they feel ashamed, because it's nothing to be ashamed about. You know, everyone has different difficulties. Just because we have a difficulty in reading and writing doesn't necessarily mean that we are unintelligent or can't learn to read or write. On the contrary, you know, it's just finding, again, the right enabling tools. Yeah.
I'm really, really happy you said that, because we're very similar. You know, we have very similar culture, and I have the same problem in Egypt. I mean, I don't know if you noticed on my page, but I actually have only one person from Egypt who was open to share their story. And I'm so grateful for her, because she's so happy about her dyslexia. You know, she's proud of it. She's not ashamed. And as you said, our society is making us kind of feel like it's not something to be okay with, you know, like having a learning difficulty in general is not something that should be okay in our society. And it's really sad. It's really sad to see that, because it's fine, you know, having dyslexia is normal, and it's not something you're choosing to have. You're born with it, and you just kind of have to practice and work on it and find the right way of learning, and then, you know, you'll live normal like everyone else. You're normal, you know. It's not something that's making you different or weird. It's something completely normal. It's just a learning difficulty. And I'm really trying to kind of have more people open up and share their stories. I'm so grateful for people who have reached out to me and they share their stories privately, you know. Like I completely understand, because it is hard putting yourself out there and sharing your really tough experience with like hundreds of people. I totally get that. But I feel like we need to kind of accept it more. Like in our society, in our culture, it needs to be accepted. And you have the same issue then clearly in Oman, because it's the exact same thing in Egypt. It's really hard having Egyptians in Egypt open up about their dyslexia.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing is there's benefit in sharing your story for yourself. It's empowering, you know, telling people that are like you that you're going to be okay and I got through it, or yeah, it was a struggle, but I'm managing, it's empowering, you know. And a lot of people felt that way, and they contacted me after we might have done a live or, you know, a kind of a post, and they said that, wow, you know, I'm so happy, and people are reaching out to me, and we're having conversation and this open dialogue. And so there's benefit in not just sharing your story for other people, but for yourself. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, that leads me to my final question. So what is one thing you'd like to tell other dyslexics out there?
Okay, so for dyslexics in school, don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for help when needed. If it's your teacher, your mom, your dad, your sibling, get help from whomever will give it to you. Everyone needs support at some point, and school is your time to gather all the tools you can get to put in your learning toolbox for university and beyond it. So take the opportunity and learn as much as you can from not only books and your teachers at school within class time, but everyone around you all the time. Take the good lessons, tips, and tricks they give you that you observe and use them to your advantage. You have great potential. We all do. Having dyslexia doesn't change that. It actually gives you an edge. Where there's struggle, we have opportunity to overcome it. We build resilience, become stronger, more intelligent individuals. For dyslexics job searching like me and going through all the psychometric tests, I feel you. The anxiety must be high. Do your best and be you, and that's all you can do, and you'll end up where you're meant to be. Whoever gets you will be very lucky to have you. And for dyslexics in the workforce, I need to contact you for advice. Maybe Sarah, you can close with a few words on how dyslexics can go about just working.
Yeah, sure. So for me personally, when I go into interviews, I've been in a few as well. I always mention that I have dyslexia, you know. I want them to have an idea that I have dyslexia, so just be aware of it, but it doesn't change anything. I'm still good at this, and these are my skills, and these are my achievements, and it doesn't change anything. But I just want them to have a sense of awareness that I have something called dyslexia. So maybe you can do a bit of research about it, kind of understand that there might be times where I make simple spelling mistakes. So you might just need to correct it first, you know. It's just good to kind of give them a heads up. But other than that, it's never affected me getting a job or being treated differently in the workforce. So I feel if you're if you feel strongly about your dyslexia and if you're proud of it and you go into like a job with your head held up high, then no one is gonna doubt you, you know? No one's gonna feel like, oh, why is this person so like scared or like worried, you know? Just be confident, you know, be proud of it. And it's gonna be something that people will think is like a strength that you have instead of like a disadvantage. So I feel like this would be my advice in terms of the workforce. It's never affected me getting a job, thankfully, and hopefully it never will, unless, you know, I go to a place where they just don't accept it. And you never know, there might be places like that, but don't go into it thinking that way, you know? So yeah,
Right.
that's what I would say.
That's great advice. I'm going to take that too. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm so glad we were able to have this talk. We've been trying to do it for a long time.
I know. Yeah, no, it's great. Like this has been a great, you know, I've learned a lot also from this conversation, especially at the end segment of like with working. I was very nervous, so no, that makes me feel better about it. You know, just go in with your head held high, and yeah, you know, the tests might be a little nerve-wracking, but you'll get through it. You know, but yeah, no, great having this conversation.
Yeah, you'll get through those tests. Don't worry. We all went through it, you know. It's a bit of like an annoying thing to go through, an annoying process, but you'll get there. You'll find a job that you love and you'll be there, and inshallah everything will go well.
Inshallah.
So thank you so much for today. Inshallah we will collaborate again, maybe in the future.
Yeah,
you never know.
definitely.
Yeah, but until then, the best of luck to you, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me.